Look at it.
So this house belonged to one of the first Ukrainians who came to Canada. His name was Ivan Pilipiv, and he was one of the first who came from the old country to Canada. So we're standing right now in his bedroom, and he slept here with his wife. So his wife, Maria Pilipiv, she slept in this bed, and Ivan Pilipiv slept in this bed here. While this house is more Canadian style, I want to say, there are still some traditional Ukrainian pieces in this house. So one of those traditional Ukrainian pieces is the Bukut, which just means that they had all of their holy icons in one corner of the house. And this is a very traditional Ukrainian idea that many Ukrainian families still have today. Just all of their icons in one corner of the house. And they were a very successful farmer family, which is why, if you guys can see, they have a tile floor in their bedroom, which was at that time very expensive. So they were very successful. They were able to afford to have tile flooring in their bedroom. They were also able to afford a telephone. So they had one of those telephones there. It was connected on a party line. Do you guys know what a party line is? Yeah. So he kept it in this corner of the house. We assume it's because he wanted his phone calls to be a little bit more private. So because this door was kept shut all of the time, it was barely ever open. The people on that side of the house couldn't really hear what he was saying on the phone. It was a little bit more private, like his business calls, but still it was a party line, so people could hear him either way on the phone. So yeah, that's a little bit about this bedroom. And then I can take all of you guys into here. This is the kitchen, but it was not just the kitchen. This is where the family spent most of their time, or all of their time. That room there would be closed, and this room here would also be closed. So technically all of their time would be spent in just this small room here. And that was, so as you can see, they slept in this space, they ate here, and they cooked their meals here. There is an upstairs to this house, but it's closed to visitors. But there's just bedrooms up there. There's 2 bedrooms, and that was used by their kids, but it was also used for the hired men on this farm. So this family, Ivan and Maria Pilipiv, they had hired people working on their farm. So their hired girl, Annie Pilipiv, she slept in this bed, and then they had hired men. One of the hired men would sleep on that bench there, and then some would sleep upstairs if they didn't have any of their kids at home, but if they were from a neighboring farm, they would just go back home to their farm after work. But yeah, most of the daily activities would be spent in here. And then this room in the house, this was mainly used for special events like wedding receptions. This is also kind of a more traditional Ukrainian idea of having a separate door or a separate entrance for your guests, or like for special events for holidays like Easter, Christmas, for wedding receptions. And they also have a cold room there. If you guys have ever heard of a cold room, yeah. It's kind of like an olden day fridge where they kept their dairy products to keep it all cool. And actually, it's like that part of the house is noticeably cooler than this part of the house. Like if you put your hand out, it's noticeably colder, which is good because it means it's working. This down here would have been the root cellar, so that's where they kept all their vegetables to keep it fresh all year long. And yeah, Annie Pilipiv, like I said, she slept in this bed, but she herself has a very interesting story because she came from a family in what was then Galicia, but is now Ukraine. So she came from a family where they only had 1 pair of shoes for their whole family. So they 1 pair of shoes, and her mom, who was Ivan Pilipiv's sister, wrote to her brother in Canada, and she was like, "Can you take one of my children with you to Canada because I can't afford to feed them?" She was a widow, she had many kids, obviously very poor family, they only had 1 pair of shoes for all of them. And Ivan said that he would take Annie to Canada with him, and he paid $50 for her journey to come to Canada. And for the 5 years that Annie worked for her uncle, he didn't pay her a dime because she was paying off the ticket that he paid for her to come here. Sometimes he would give her like cash money, but his wife wouldn't like that, so but yeah, Annie, she moved out in 1928, and she moved to Edmonton where she married and lived out the rest of her life. But in the 1920s, the period that we're showing, she slept and lived on this bed. Talking about, so if you stick your hand out, you can feel it's colder. That's why there's no sun in here, because you want it to be as cold as possible to prevent your milk or your sour cream from spoiling in there. And this part, So this is not cheese, it's soap. It looks like cheese, but it's actually soap. Maria Polipiv, she made her own soap. And so they have their laundry in this bin here, and then they have a wash basin and a washboard. And in these barrels, they kept stuff for fermentation, so cabbage rolls and sauerkraut. And it's kept close to the cold room, so it could be very well fermented in this room. But yeah, like I said, this room was mostly closed for the most part. Even warm upstairs. So upstairs the kids would be cold most of the time. What they did do though is they opened this door and then they let all the warm air from this room rise to the top, but still it was cold most of the time. It didn't help that much. But this room here, they have a stove there, and that's what they use to warm that room. So they have their own stove to keep them warm in their bedroom. So there's still some wood in here. Wood in this part of the stove, and then I lit it with matches, and it was emitting heat, and it was keeping them warm. And that's what they would have done as well, to keep themselves warm. And then these parts would get hot, and that's how they would cook on the stove. Oh, and they also had these irons, which when these plates would heat up, they would put it and heat up their irons, and that's how they would iron their clothes. With these kind of olden day plates, they had ones like these, so you could warm this one up and switch the handle and put it on that one. This is where he would obviously sell tickets, but a train station was usually the first building built in a new town, because it's a lot easier to build the rest of the town if you can ship your materials in. And so the train station would also often serve as the bank and the post office and the telegraph office until those buildings were built in the rest of the town. And the station agent here in the time we show it in 1929 was Fred Stone. And he lived in this back area with his 3 children. So we have a sort of living area, dining room. Through there is the kitchen, and then upstairs is the bedrooms. There were 3 bedrooms and then a little private office for Fred. In the kitchen is one of the cooler parts of the site. He has an ice box, which this is the only one we have on site here at the village, and it is sort of a marker of wealth. Fred Stone, the station agent, was paid about $5 or $6 a day, and the average for a working man was about $1 or $2. And so being able to afford an icebox, you're pretty rich. The stove is also fairly expensive, about $100. Have you been out to the farmstead yet?
Yeah.
Out there, they'll probably tell you about their $40 stoves, which is very exciting to them. Yeah, this one's $100. So these instruments, a mandolin, a banjo, and a violin. Fred Stone played 5 different instruments. He played all 3 of these, and he also played the saxophone and the horn, I believe.
Do we have violin?
Yes, we have a violin. It's just in a little bit rougher condition than the other 2 instruments, so it's missing a bridge. But yeah, he could play all 3 of these instruments, and did so. This was sort of his evening entertainment. He would play for his children, and they would sing along with him sometimes. The family had a picture of him playing with a band. And this picture is the Quebec Bridge right after its completion in 1929. And it is sort of almost an advertisement, because this bridge was built by the Canadian National Railway, and this picture was issued to all the station agents across Canada, essentially. So they were sort of advertising, look at our bridge, it's so cool. His little office, this is a writing desk that I think was actually owned by Fred Stone himself. Most of the furniture in the station would be issued to him by the railway company. He didn't have a lot, he was moving a lot, so he didn't want to drag all his furniture everywhere. But this, I think, was his own personal desk.
Can we open it?
No, I don't have a key for it right now.
And everything is actually
they're original to the building, like they are the actual furniture that Fred himself owned, or they're
pieces from that time period. So they might not be original to the building, but they are from